I'm delighted to welcome you all on behalf of Sapphire Connect to the Perspective Roundtable series, focusing on securing the digital transformation, presented by Exclusive Network and CrowdStrike. The disruptors are being disrupted, and the rush is on to digitally transform everything. Today's digital environment has grown more complex than ever, thus increasing the threat landscape and expanding the attack surface, giving attackers more targets from which to choose. We wanted to take a deeper look into the key intersection of digital transformation and cybersecurity through the lenses of those tasked with protecting their enterprises, such as CISOs, CTOs, and CIOs. I now would like to introduce you to our esteemed panelists who have joined us and will be joining us. Abhijit Shah, CTO Nippon India Mutual Fund, Akhil Verma, CISO Airtel Payments Bank, Anand Subramanian, Head BFSI CrowdStrike, Anuprita Daga, CISO Yes Bank, Manish Sehgal, CISO AU Small Finance Bank, Mitesh Tolia, CISO Reliance Jio Payments Bank, Puneet Kaur Kohli, CTO Universal Sompo General Insurance, Rajesh Signal, Head IT and CISO BSE India, Sarath Chandra, CTO Airtel Payment Bank, Satbir Singh, Lead Technical Consultant, CrowdStrike India, Subhojit Roy, SVP CIO, SBI Funds, Sunil Soni, CISO Punjab National Bank, Suryanarayanan K, CISO Central Bank, and Vinod Sivaram Regional Sales Manager, CrowdStrike. And now, without taking any more of your time, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Mr. Burgess, partner EY India, and request him to start the session. Over to you, Burgess.
Thank you, Rishi. I had a big opening note, but I think you captured everything else. So I'll start off straight, securing the digital transformation. And the first question probably will go to Vinod, who's the host at CrowdStrike. Vinod, your perspective, the technology, ML, AI, we always thought the answer to that is in tech. But what do you think is a cybersecurity focus required? Is tech the only answer? What are the missing links as companies when you advise them to secure the digital chain end to end?
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everybody in the call. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Vinod. So the answer to that just now lies in the fact that bulk of the cybersecurity initiatives are getting driven around automation, around machine learning, or around artificial intelligence. So it is very easy to be drawn into that sort of false sense of hope that you put in a tech, you put in something, a nice AI or a machine learning tool, and that's going to solve a lot of your issues. But then to fall back on the age-old mantra. I'm sure a lot of us have been in the industry for decades now. The people, process, and the tools mantra that people used to talk about, that's not going away anywhere in a hurry, right? So tools is important, and when we talk about processes, yes, a lot of the mundane processes are getting automated today. Things like vulnerability management, just for example, those are getting automated, which is good. But the one that we always highlight to our customers is on the people side of it, which is a very important pillar. And a lot of times we think that because automation is coming in, let's do away with the people. Now that's partially true. But let me give you two instances on why people part is very important, or what should customers look for when we talk about the people. The first is there a need for people to be there? A lot of automation and AI is becoming. The short answer for that is yes, but it's the intelligent deployment of the people which is very important. So you need to take people away from a lot of those reactive stuff that we tend to do from security perspective and put them into areas which really make a difference. And the area which will really make the difference today is because a lot of automation is happening. A lot of the indicators are going to be black and white. But with automation and AI, there are going to be chunks of gray areas for you. And those gray areas cannot be resolved by machine learning or AI that easily. And that's where the people intelligence comes in. Now, when we talk about gray areas, normally we think that false positives, right? Now, false positives, yes, that is one thing to deal with. But in cybersecurity, the biggest threat is not the false positive, but the false negative. What if there is a silent failure of technology and you are not even aware of it, leading to a breach? So we are increasingly seeing need for highly qualified people who can look at the machine telemetry in real time and pick out those gray areas, and more importantly, pick up those false negatives. So that is one crucial area where we do not see the involvement of people going away anytime soon. Because end of the day, it is a bot versus AI. The adversaries are using bots or AI, and it's your AI on the other side. And the best AI on that particular day is going to win. And the difference between getting breached and not getting breached is how do you pick out those gray areas, and for that you need human intelligence. The corollary to that is you put the best person there, he's supposed to pick up the gray areas, but is he skilled enough to do that? You might get a person who is very skilled and certified, but in cybersecurity, you need to keep learning every single day. If you haven't learned for 1 week, you are already behind.
Thanks, Vinod. I think you very rightly mentioned it's a balance between the right tech with the people take over. I just want to now a question to the panelists. Thanks for setting the context. We've seen that adversaries are taking great strides in improving the attack sophistication. I think CrowdStrike report says 60% of those targeted companies are done through non-file, non-malware using advanced techniques. Especially in our sector, in BFSI, how well are we geared up to respond to such attacks? And what are the challenges that CISOs face when the whole threat landscape has changed so much? And how are they leveraging the best tools and processes along with the people to respond to that? And let me first ask with Anuprita, from your perspective as an eminent CISO, what are your views on how are you sort of gearing up to face this challenge?
As you mentioned, that it's a moving target, and people, process, and technology, has to go hand in hand. And the way technology is being evolved, and the kind of user awareness, and the kind of people preparedness for responding to that is very varying from organization to organization. So technology is evolving at let's say 100 km per hour, but or maybe more than that. But at the same time, our adoption and our agility to change to that technology in security domain is little less. Having a single console to manage and having that visibility part of it, I think that is the most challenging part of it. Another thing is when it comes to cloud, what happens is that there are again different types of clouds where integrating all these clouds with on-prem and then having a single monitoring team for across the platform and correlation across the platform. I think that is one challenging part. What I feel that that is going to be very, very critical and very, very important. And this is where we are still struggling to get that clarity and define that correlation rules and respond to it.
Thank you, Anuprita. You mentioned clearly the tech is changing at 100 kilometers per hour or more. Adoption is clearly a challenge, and having a single console is your biggest. Sunil, Soni, from your perspective, thanks, Anuprita, for your views. Sunil,
Thanks,
Soni, your perspective, how are you gearing up to face this challenge?
See, first of all, let me set the context right. I am not the CISO for the organization. So I am looking from a different perspective altogether. That is from business. Right? So, and secondly, being a CIO of the organization.
A very important perspective.
Yeah. So while you're looking at, kind of adoption, that's one of the prime challenge, because though we are looking at the customer-centric changes, adoption is a big challenge, right? Now, having adopted, issue is with regard to, whether this adoption is going to bring a lot of results. While you're looking at the kind of results, it includes both. So diverting to the security aspect as of today, adopting the ops part and looking into the kind of security from a customer perspective, the customer today would require the enablement which is secure enough for them to understand, and also looking from a perspective that they are in a position to, look into the kind of, ruggedness of the technology without even getting into the nitty-gritty of it. That is one from a business perspective. So from a previous profile, as you said, from a CISO's perspective, the issue would be to understand the deployed technologies, rationalize them, because this is not going to be one single technology which is going to be in place. This is the humongous integration of different technologies which is going to take place while you're looking at the digitizations. Secondly, it is not only the organization, it is the sum total of various different service providers and organizations which is put together going to create this ecosystem. So essentially looking at the weakest link would be the major most challenge today with regard to us. And also looking at the kind of challenges that it results into. Expectation would be to see that customer don't really get into understanding this. However, at the back of it, we are in a position to provide them with a safe and sound technology. Integrating with different service providers on handshakes and exchange of information has to be secure. That is where the major most challenge is today.
Thanks, Sunil. I think well put. Integrating with different providers. You actually echoing what Anuprita mentioned. Thanks for your inputs on that. Sarath, over to you. Your perspective. We've got two perspectives complementing each other, having their own flavor. Do you want to bring about a perspective of processes being matured? We saw people and tech.
Yeah, I think I'll start with the why of this, right? I mean, why do we want to secure our systems? I think this is something that is very close to my heart. The reason we are doing whatever we're doing is to basically get customer trust. I mean, for our businesses, it is not just a CIO goal or a CISO goal to say that, okay, we're running safe systems. It is imperative that in the current industry that we are in, a customer has to feel safe using our services. And it is not the role of a CISO organization or just the technology team to be providing this safety. It is everybody's business role to ensure that when we're delivering value to customers, services to customers, they are secure. It is not about a core team which still sits in a silo and tries to get products into the organization, and whatever dashboards and other things is not sufficient. It has to be something, especially I think Anuprita talked very nicely about the speed of change that's happening. For us to be able to manage that speed of change safely, it has to be every individual's organizational goal to ensure that they are observing what's happening in the system, they are observing what's happening with the customer, and ensure that they're taking care of this. Now, what is the aspects of people and process that we have to enable here? One is observability. Ensure that everything, whether it's happening good or bad, is very easily observable to the larger organization, so that it is not one person's job or somebody else, one team's job to figure out what is happening, but anybody should be able to observe and make or call out risks. The second thing is a regular rhythm. Whenever change is happening, we introduce a new product, we introduce a new technology. It's important for us to ensure that everybody is comfortable about that and they know how to use those, and they know why these are being introduced into the organization. It's a lot of learning that we need to invest in. Now, this learning should not just be for siloed teams, but it has to go all over across. The final thing is business teams and product teams. They also actually have to be taking a much stronger this thing into security and start making it part of every product release that we are talking about. And as part of our processes, we need to ensure that the development processes or the deployment processes have enough inputs of risks that we face in building it in a particular manner, and also the security requirements that are necessary to hit that. So I think I can only align with everybody saying that it is about people, process, and technology. And there is no alternative. And it has now become, previously, possibly a decade back, there could have been a CISO team which was particularly doing this, but we're not in that stage right now. Everybody has to take ownership of this, including business teams. So it's unless we internalize that as a process, as a organization, it's not going to work. So
thank you, Sarath, for
at least
setting the
that's how I
context.
look at it.
Thank you so much for getting the context on the why, how to get customers' trust, how to build business along with that. I'll give it to Sadbir. Sadbir, how are customers worldwide managing this, and what are the learnings you can utilize from CrowdStrike in different countries to the panelists out here? Sadbir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So one thing that I have seen is we see, as Sarath said, that the speed of change is immense now. And the speed of change, we don't just see in terms of business activities, but we also see it in terms of attack activities as well. The threat actors are growing. They're coming up with a lot of new capabilities which are not yet known to the world. We track so many different threat actors. These are nation state actors, people who are funded by the government of some nation, maybe China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, Pakistan. There is a huge community of e-crime threat actors also. So from CrowdStrike perspective, what we have seen is these e-crime threat actors, we call them spiders, and they typically take about 10 hours to start spreading in customers' environment. And we measured this 10-minute or how quickly they spread as a very important metric. And the reason for that is if you look at the current pandemic situation, as the virus spreads from one person to other person and spreads more, the entire problem becomes more complicated. We want to stop the problem as soon as possible so it does not become big, it does not become complicated, and we can rectify it quickly. So when we track these speeds of different threat actors, we saw that these e-crime threat actors who come up with crypto mining attacks, who come up with ransomware attacks, the whole idea is to gain more bitcoins, more cryptocurrency, which they can go and use them for some other work that they have. Especially, we see a lot of this activity also happening from nation states. For example, North Korea. North Korea is building up so many ransomware attacks to gain cryptocurrencies, which allows them to continue their military operations against other nations. Sometime back, when there was tensions in the borders in India and China, we saw nation state threat actors of China also doing a lot of attacks on the Indian origin. When we looked into the speed of theirs, they typically take around 4 hours to laterally spread. Bears, in our context, we call bears as a Russian nation state threat actor. They are the fastest. They typically take about 19 minutes to start laterally spreading in an environment. So if we want to deal with such type of attackers, we have to be very fast. Otherwise, there would be a major impact to our environment. Practically, when we timeline all of this, we see the actual responses of customers who have best of everything, next generation. The time to detect such an activity in an environment takes about 120 hours. Investigate takes about 50 hours, and remediation takes about 52 hours. So I'm typically talking about a week's time. So if you look at some incidents which you might have heard in CISO community or other communities, it typically takes this much amount of time. But attackers are very fast, as we saw. So the golden rule that we have now in the industry, that's the rule of 1-10-60. 1 minute to find out when something is happening, 10 minutes to investigate, and 60 minutes to take care of it, irrespective of whichever tools or technologies or processes that we build up to achieve this. That's the golden rule, 1-10-60.
Thank you, Sadbir. I like the 1-10-60 rule. I'm going to go back to the CISOs. Now, this sounds crazy. The spider, the bears flying in 9 minutes, 10. I'll get somebody else who's not responded. Subhojit Roy, do you think this is practically possible in our environment, 1-10-60 or faster, or do we have a way to go? And if our FS industry, who's supposed to be the best and the most sort of secure, how much are we ready from this gap? Subhojit Roy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd say so 1-10-60. So, but to be very honest, I think there's a huge gap as on today. But thankfully, I think yeah, we are progressing towards much towards that fulfilling that gap. But as on today, I think if you look at the BFSI or financial services sector across the country or globe, yeah, so there's a huge gap between the attackers and the defenders. So as you know, there's one saying that these attackers need to succeed only once, and defenders need to succeed every time. So that gap is there. Instead of that, people, processes, tools, and technologies, that gap is there due to various factors. That's the only answer I can give. But but most of
Thanks,
us.
it's a very honest answer, saying we acknowledge. I think any improvement begins from the first state of acknowledging that we're the gap, and then saying,
Right.
I'll go to Mitesh now. Mitesh, old friend and colleague. We've heard different stats coming out saying advanced nations, some nations working only on this cybercrime. How are we as companies who safeguard the main infrastructure of the country in finance and telecom, protecting ourselves to withstand such huge threats? Mitesh, over to you.
Yeah. Hi, am I audible?
Loud and clear, Mitesh. Looking good and handsome as always.
Great. Thank you. So basically, fortunately for us in the BFSI, we are very well regulated, and we ensure that we comply to it.
That's fortunate.
And we are looking forward to the cloud guidelines to be published by RBI, while most of the banks who have already migrated have ensured that they frame their own guidelines at broad level are secure. But RBI coming out with that will ensure that we are also compliant. So all this will ensure that overall the customer's data is secure. And it's a long race. It keeps our job secure and ensure that we keep running.
It keeps our job secure. I like that. Thank you, Mitesh, for your frank answer. I'll go to Kritika, who's not yet spoken, and after that, Vishwa. Your perspectives. We've seen first few sessions, people speaking about security, process, technology. That's good. We saw a different spin saying, guys, you are talking at a different level. Attackers are at a different level. We saw Mitesh and Subhojit mentioning that, look, the gap is high. We're looking at compliance guidelines from the industry to set the standards. Where are we gonna wait for the industry, or are we gonna do something ourselves? If yes, the how part is what I'm trying. If you leave this discussion today with more questions than answers on the how part, this presentation and this conference has had its impact. So I'm gonna give it to Kritika, and then after that followed by Vishwa. On the how part, how do we narrow this gap between attackers, bears, spiders coming in 10 and 19 minutes, and we looking at a different response scenarios? Kritika, your perspective, followed by Vishwa. Hello, Kritika, you're there? Okay, I guess she's probably...
Burgess, Kritika is just making notes of the entire discussions.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Sorry, Vishwa, your perspective?
He as well as from Kritika's team is making notes, both of them.
Okay, all right, sorry. I'm new to the panel out there.
I completely understand.
I can't realize who's who. But Manikandan, from your perspective.
I guess you move back to the other gentlemen you've already spoken to.
Okay, so I thought most of them are going to come in. I'll go back to the first few people who mentioned. Anuprita, back to you. I think the last people are more into taking notes. Your perspective, are you ready to face this 110-60 challenge, or we are a lot behind? And the how part. And I love the honesty saying, yes, we are not ready. But how do we, once we know we're not ready, how do we capture the gap?
So I think that's really tough, Burgess, because I think 110-16 is really ideal. A very ideal way of reaching. But I I was making a note that, okay, this is what the target, what I should be setting up even for our team also. See, multiple things, one is that how do we maintain the preventive controls also. Okay, so from preventive control perspective, that how do we maintain the data protection part of it? And so One is that prevention and detection. And in the recent years, what we are seeing is that there is less focus on the prevention, because then you're reducing the boundaries, while the technology evolution is happening from the expansion of the boundary perspective. So how do we more focus on the detection perspective? And that is where I think a lot of things are yet to come. And this is what my earlier focus was, that how do we have the better detection controls? How do we make this as the design level? How do we make that as a people process technology? And another thing is on how do we have a single console where we have correlation and see detection, time to detect and time to mitigate. So these are the two things which are going to play a role in the next few years probably, right? In that sense, I think we have to work a lot. We have to work on the analytics. We have to include a lot of artificial intelligence or machine-based learning-based kind of behavioral pattern kind of thing, maybe for the asset or for the user. I think those kind of things, what we need to include it in our whole portfolio, and that might help us to reduce our time to detect and time to mitigate. That is what my personal view is.
Thank you, Anuprita. It's an honest response to see how we can get and improve that. Saurav, you started with saying, let me start out why customers trust. How will you get customers trust if they're not confident enough that you will be able to prevent an attack on their data which you are having, or their finance, or their assets which you are holding? How do you plan to build that gap? And what's your advice to CISOs to bridge that gap?
I think in that context, first, it is about a lot of internal looking into ourselves and seeing what we're doing as an organization, definitely. But I will also reiterate one of the speaker who called out the regulator. I think RBI, as a regulator for banks, is very concerned about customer trust and ensuring that all of us who are managing customer information and the customer value are following the right processes and are always vigilant about this. And that regulatory focus on that also helps all of us as an organization, all the way from executives to middle management and the people on the ground, to understand that this is extremely critical. So the focus there becomes not just delivering value, but delivering value safely. And that becomes part of the culture of the organization. And hence, this regulatory focus on that is extremely valuable. The second thing is, how do we keep up with this? It is obviously a race. Like another speaker said, the attacker needs to be successful once, but we have to be on our toes every day, every minute. Can we hit the 110, 60? Maybe, maybe not. But what we need to be able to build a culture of is always, whenever we observe something or see something, everybody in the organization should understand anything that is uncommon. Please raise your hand and say, hey, is this something that we need to be taking care of? Unless everybody at the ground level builds that culture of vigilantism against security threats, it is going to be difficult. The other thing is, there's so many aspects from which attacks can come through. So thinking that this can happen manually is practically, I would say, foolish. It needs technology, deep involvement of technology, and ensuring that that technology is always improving with human feedback. So these are continuous investments that are necessary. Obviously, attackers are looking at various kinds of innovations that they are trying to do to attack systems. We have to be on our toes, and it is mandatory that all of us keep doing this on a regular basis. That cultural maturity to take care of this is extremely important. There's no other way. I mean, technology is the way.
Perfect.
Processes ensuring visibility, and third, building a culture where people are calling out things openly without any. This thing is absolutely necessary.
So transparency and openly. Mitesh, you want to respond back to Sarath's comment? He mentioned the RBI, which you mentioned, regulation is good, but you got to go beyond. And your perspective on this, Mitesh?
Yeah, overall, it's a priority for us to keep our business nimble, be able to offer new technologies and products, at the same time being compliant and bringing value. So I think what we have managed to do is strike a right balance of being able to digitize, being able to leverage certain cloud services, and at the same time, secure ourselves by keeping the critical assets in-house. So, overall, we have taken care of the required steps. But yes, with the SolarWinds episode happening, I mean, this is just a case in point. It becomes extremely difficult to trust anybody for that matter. So we go back to the zero trust model of not trusting anybody, nobody, anybody. Be it RBI, be it the OEM, be it the ISPs or whatever. And this is especially a big challenge considering the quick development or cloud focused development that is happening and rollout. So those are the things I think we should take care of.
Thank you, Mitesh. Don't trust anyone. I like what you said, critical assets in-house. Is that a strategy that, by getting it secure? And well, that's good. Is that something you think will make you more secure? Because the world's going towards outsourcing, managed services. What's the current gap between these? I can see you smiling.
I agree with you. To be very transparent, yes, we are evaluating options and cloud, but without the required regulatory guidelines, you never know on which side of the fence you sit. That's point one. And point two, with the data privacy laws being incubated and it's been in the incubation phase for nearly a year plus, at least here in India, we are not sure. Where do we draw the line? Sorry. So, those are the things which are probably holding us back. But yes, a lot of systems have moved on. I see a lot of my colleagues having moved over to, cloud services, and it makes sense. We also are looking at leveraging. So it's a way of life that's going to be the norm. We just need to see when. It's just a question of when, not how, not why.
Okay, I'm going to ask Abhijit. Abhijit, we've not spoken much. Abhijit Shah, your perspective, we've had different angles. We've had 11060, we said we are not ready. Anuprita said leverage technology. Mitesh said keep things in-house, waiting for RBI guidelines. Sarath said don't wait, but do on your own. Your perspective.
I just like to take a step back, and I like to kind of highlight the way the industry has evolved. If you look at the digital ecosystem, I mean, it's not the security of one organization as a whole. So the business models that are emerging are between fintechs, between banks, between their vendors, the cloud service providers. So the business model that has evolved has a multi-entity business model. It's a multi-entity business model. Now, we cannot restrict the security to one organization. There has been so much of a data exchange that happens. So many organizations would use their APIs. They would expose their APIs on the internet. How much secure these interactions are. There is customer data flowing from the bank to the middle players, like, say, for example, there are so many fintechs that are sitting on top of the bank, providing some additional services on top of what bank provides. Now, the data from the customer data goes in their hands. What is the protection that we have with regards to that? So, I mean, one is the disruption in the ecosystem, and what are the boundaries of the security that we need to look at. That's the important question. Secondly, if you look at 90% of the attacks that have happened or the incidents that have happened, most of them have insiders who have kind of given out some information. I mean, there is an insider who has been participant in that incident, and that is how the entire event took place, the attack took place. So I agree with what Sarath said at a point in time where he said the awareness is really important. There are so many phishing mails that come, and people will blindly click on some mail. There will be some worm that gets downloaded and it gets spread across. So in that scenario, it's very important for people to be aware of what rules they need to follow, what they need to adopt as a process, as a policy. And certainly, if you look at the way the hackers are kind of getting advanced with the technologies they're using with regards to AI. I mean, if you simply look at neural fuzzing, so they're able to kind of generate the input data in terms of millions of records in seconds. And they are able to try that fuzzy logic on your input systems, and they are able to hack your code. I mean, that is the way, if they are able to do it. So
from a counter perspective, we need to kind of ensure that our systems are also enabled to kind of handle that kind of attack.
Systems, people, and processes. People can also do the same testing yourself, right, Abhijit?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to Suryanarayanan. I think you joined a bit later. I didn't ask you. Thank you, Abhijit, for your response. Mr. Suryanarayanan, your perspective. We've had process people. How can tech? I'm still concerned on the how part. Everyone's saying the what's to be done. It's important. We got that. Mr. Suryanarayanan, on the how part, how do you think you can make a differentiation from your company perspective? Mr. Suryanarayanan Kumar, your views on the subject? You're there? Okay, while you come in, I'm going to take it back to CrowdStrike, right? We've seen that everyone says, yes, it's important, why part. We're going to ask Anand from CrowdStrike, your perspective. How do you guide all these people, CISOs, CIOs, using tech, using the human element? Is threat intel a good response for them to get ready to face attacks? Timely threat intel, so at least they know who's attacking them. They know if there are going to be a provider. So is that your response to help these guys?
Sure. Thanks, Burgess, for pointing this question on to me. Good evening, everybody. So let's stick on to the basics. What is threat intel? Threat intelligence is an important investment for an organization's security posture. So it's going to provide you a prevention by giving you an advance, the intel about an adversary. Now, having said this, a good threat intel should not be just providing you bad IPs, bad domains. We have gone far ahead than this. A good threat intel, every attack, at the heart of every attack, there is a human adversary behind it. So a threat intelligence should be providing you the adversary details, the techniques and tactics used. These are all some of the core things which an organization should be knowing. Just to tell you a use case, if you see for past 1 week, there will be prominent figures in the industry talking about or supporting cryptocurrencies. Now, this is the adverse effect of it is, what I see is in next 2-3 months, there is going to be a lot of crypto mining attacks. There is going to be a ransomware attacks because the value of the cryptocurrencies is going to increase. So is the organizations are getting any kind of intelligence regarding this? That's where the organization need to prepare for with the threat intelligence. That's my 2 cents about it, Burgess.
Thank you. And back to Mitesh. Mitesh, you said you look for a regulator to give you guidelines. What would you expect? Would you expect more tougher compliances, like you have a 6-hour reporting, or how would you expect? What is your ask of the regulator to help you, besides putting compliances and requirements? And Anuprita, even you can chip in. As Yes Bank, as a financial services, what is your ask from the regulator to help you within these tough times?
Honestly, Burgess, so today there are very high-level guidelines and which Mitesh was referring about the data protection. So when regulator is talking about, regulator is saying that regulatory entity need to ensure that the data is protected at all the time, right? But when it is on the cloud perspective and the adoption is so high, if there is very clear guideline, it will be very easy for the CISO also, and it will reduce the subjectivity in the kind of controls and the kind of expectation what regulator is having. Otherwise, from our understanding and high-level understanding perspective and risk appetite perspective, there might be multiple things which we might be doing it, but regulator will always have a concern saying that, okay, why this is not done and why that is not done. And coming back to from the business perspective, the pressure on the CISO is going to be like, okay, all other companies have already adopted it, and then why are you having a concern on that, right? So those are always examples given from the business perspective. Therefore, if there is any very clear guideline, then that subjectivity can be reduced, and that can help the CISOs even to come back to the business as well as face all the regulatory perspective. And it's not only regulator, it is even when anything happens wrong, board is definitely going to question, because obviously CISOs are accountable for it.
I was asking, thank you for bringing this up. How involved are boards into these decisions? Is it just left to the company, or do you see board members actually, one trend I've seen is board members actually are mandating a cyber expert on their boards. Do you see that trend happening in many companies? Like a cyber expert, a tech expert, who's going to especially advise the board and ask the right questions?
Honestly, I mean, if you're expecting me to answer on that, I think that maturity is yet to come, honestly. There are, to be fair on the both side, whether they have a knowledge or they do not have a knowledge, but still one thing is very clear, that there is a tension on cybersecurity, and honestly, thanks to lockdowns and work from home kind of culture, I think in last 8 to 9 months there is sufficient attention which has been received to the cybersecurity team. So okay, coming back to the expert perspective, I think those skill sets are still, there is a huge gap between somebody understanding the cybersecurity maturity perspective and what right questions need to be asked and what right guidance need to be given. But yes, from their perspective, whatever they understand, definitely, I mean, my experience says that, there is a sufficient attention which is being given. Skill set perspective, I think there is quite a good gap, and there is quite good potential in having a good board members with a good amount of knowledge.
Thank you. Sudhir, Soni, over to you. Do you think companies are putting in board members? Do you find a board more inquisitive into actually how do you secure it? Or do you think there is a different plane?
Yes, the plain answer to this is yes. The kind of maturity that you had a couple of years back, where the decision was primarily left to the CISOs, and the necks were always hanged in case of something wrong had happened. From that to the maturity where today there are information security steering committees meetings, which are happening, chaired by the MD and CEOs of the organizations, and also the board members represented there. And also, while you say, whether a cyber tech or a tech expert is there on the board, so most of the banks today have this facilitation done, courtesy the regulator. Because of the Gopala Krishna Committee recommendations, a lot of compliances have put in place, though it has taken some time, but now things are in place. As Anuprita said, in the last about 9-10 months, the gravity of situation has actually tilted more towards the security professionals and the kind of concerns being raised by them. So they are being heard now appropriately, and are also being, their directions or their findings are also taken more seriously than what it used to be a few years back.
I like the word. Anuprita mentioned tension and attention on cybersecurity, and you mentioned gravity tilting more towards cyber, and they're being more heard. I'm going to ask this question to Anand and Vinod. Vinod, cybersecurity, a positive brand differentiator, is that really nice to have, or are companies taking it seriously? And how can you are the specialist, you are the how-to guy. How will you advise the people on the panel of helping them making cyber a positive brand differentiator?
Sorry, the first part of your question, I missed it. Can you just repeat that?
So we all say cybersecurity is not a cost, but a positive brand differentiator. How would you advise the people on the panel to achieve that for their respective companies?
Absolutely. So I think from whatever we have heard over the last 40-45 minutes, the awareness is there, right? In terms of, and the fact has really come out that it's not just security for the sake of doing it. There is a thought behind why security is required and how does it intrinsically start impacting the companies. Even maybe 3 or 4 years ago, companies used to say, okay, an incident happened, let it go. Vis-a-vis now people thinking that an incident is going to impact the brand, impact the, the customer side, or your standing in the market. Now, the way we are looking at this is, one thing is to say, there are a set of regulations, and what do we need to do to meet those regulations? Because that used to be a mindset that we used to walk in earlier, where people used to say, here is a checklist, and I have ticked off all those checklists, so now the work is done. vis-a-vis now coming to an outcome-based approach to cybersecurity, where what should be the final outcome that we are looking at, which is stopping breaches and doing whatever it takes to stop a breach or stop a customer data or a employee data from falling into the wrong hands. So this change of focus from being just compliant on paper to looking at something which is outcome based, where we say that at the end of the year, when we sit in front of the board, are we able to stand up and tell the board emphatically that, we didn't let the brand down, we didn't let our customers down, and we didn't let the board down. That shift to an outcome rather than a tick mark activity is something that we are seeing customers starting to move in large numbers, and that pays for itself. So it's not about what is the cost of cybersecurity, rather look at, if you don't meet that outcomes, what is it going to be a cost to the company and to a professional individually. And that's what is driving, I think, a large number of these conversations that we are having with the customers, where we focus on the outcome and not on the technology or what is the best technology available in the world. It needs nothing. Rather, let's focus on what is it that we are going to deliver at the end of the year, and can we stand by whatever we are committing. So as technology partners, we always tell the customer, can we jointly stand up and commit something to the board, and then ensure that at the end of the year we are delivering that together. So it's not a sell and walk away situation. It's walking with the customer to arrive at an outcome. And in cybersecurity, it's very difficult to promise outcomes, but I think that's what now customers are expecting from tech vendors, where people don't just sell a tool and walk away, rather walk with the customer in terms of achieving those outcomes that have been put out there for them.
So you're saying, Vinod, in a sense, customers are spending more, and rightly so. But what is the area? Is endpoint being more secured? Is network being more secured? Is it spectrum? Is it only cloud security? Where are the areas you find? And from that, the audience can know, if the world trend is going in that direction, are they in line or they are going at a complete tangent? Where do you see companies spending, especially in the West, who's supposed to be slightly more in advance in spending perspective? Where's the spend coming to? Endpoint, network, server, router, perimeter?
So I think the spend is essentially now on workloads. People are not worried about, because there was a lot of discussion around cloud versus in-house versus users and especially working remotely. So the spend is now coming in terms of securing your workloads, irrespective of where they are. It could start with the basic laptop desktops, going down to the data centers, which is in-house, and going into the multi-cloud architectures which are there, especially in some of those organizations where cloud has become a reality to a large extent, where let's say 60 or 70% of the workloads are moved to public cloud in terms of AWS, Azure, and now we are seeing a lot of Google Cloud also taking off. So investments, because people have realized that with the change, one in operating models, where take for example IT services or banks, right? A year ago, nobody thought that you are going to have employees take their laptops or desktops and work from home. Who even thought that would happen? So the entire focus at that time was trying to
take them via Uber cars, yeah, like the way they did that.
Absolutely. So I think a lot of focus was there in terms of fortifying your networks and ensuring that nobody can come in to a point now where there is no boundary at all, right? It's become borderless. Your organization has become borderless. So people now have realized that it is the endpoint which has become very vulnerable, partly because people are working out of different places, and by choice or by force, you have to go out to the cloud because of the applications which are there. So we are seeing a lot of investments happen in securing the workloads, because end of the day, the attacks are landing on your endpoints, be it your laptops, desktops, servers, or your cloud. So not to say that firewalls or proxies or the other security devices that you have there are not functioning. They are trying to do whatever best they can. But given the kind of attacks we are seeing, the first line of defense and the last line of defense is now your endpoint. And that's where people are trying to fortify things at the endpoint level and trying to get a real-time visibility. It's not about knowing things that happened hours ago. or not even knowing what is happening if your remote employee is working out of home and you don't know what is happening at the endpoint. So two things clearly we are seeing. Number one, in terms of improving the endpoint posture. The second thing is gaining real-time visibility. Because just like on the network, you need to know everything that is happening in real time. Now people want to know at an endpoint or at a server level what is happening in real time.
But isn't there a paradox? One time people are saying, I don't care what device you do for, I don't mind, is it zero trust? While at the other end, people are spending more on securing the endpoint. Now, for the audience, how do these tie in together?
Absolutely. So I think the zero trust theme goes across. It does not matter. And endpoint security is part of your zero trust architecture. And it's not something that you're doing away from zero trust. Just like on the network, you were inspecting every single thing, or you were not trusting anything at a network level. That same concept now you're extending to your desktops or your endpoints, where you're not trusting anything happening on an endpoint. Rather, you're inspecting every single process, you're looking at every single user, you're looking at every single execution that is happening on an endpoint. And just because, let's say, a user is known user or a tool is a whitelisted tool, you're not going to blindly let that run through your organization. So the zero trust concepts that were running on the network are now being brought down to the endpoint level, where you are putting your endpoint through a microscope to see what is happening there in real time and extending that zero trust story to the endpoint. And that's why the investments are doubling or tripling as we talk on the endpoint side to extend those capabilities of network to your endpoint as well.
It's a good time to be in business if your investments are doubling and tripling for you, Vinod. I'm going to ask Puneet Kohli, who's joined us. Puneet, we saw multiple perspectives. We started saying cyber is a positive brand differentiator. We saw Anuprita, Mitesh and all mentioning how the challenge is there. We saw someone from CrowdStrike saying 1-10-60 is a rule. In your company, in your guidance, under your sort of advice, how do you think we have survived in this pandemic, and what's your one advice to your fellow panelists? Puneet, over to you.
Can I have the last sentence repeated once again, please?
So what's your advice to your fellow panelists on how to survive and thrive in this pandemic from a cyber perspective? How do you secure the digital chain end to end? What have you done which you'd like to share as a best practice to the others?
Okay, thank you first of all for the opportunity, and and hello to my co-panelists and the viewers. So apologies for joining late. Basically the outcome out of this pandemic is like not a very the normal or the new normal. It is basically something is like about since everybody has got a flexibility of working from anywhere, the endpoints need to be very much secured, because you don't know, we have introduced the concept of BYOD, or probably most of the time the non-provisioning of the in absence of a work from home policy. People have been given an acceptability to go with the all VDI kind of a model. So in such ways, basically your technology landscape should be robust enough to handle all the endpoints. Basically, you never know which trusted or untrusted endpoints are coming and hooking onto your corporate applications. One is that. Second is about the CASB model, which is in terms of the zero trust. What I'm talking about, a CASB model, which will understand, about your overall ecosystem in terms of if you say that, we are going with any kind of an architecture the way service-oriented architecture, we're talking about a microservices model where the entire world is running on the API models, right? And when where either an acceptance for an exposure or intake of, either you expose or you consume the web services in either ways. So, basically around the clock vulnerability assessment in terms of your, key points, especially the customer facing applications, in terms of people who are accessing the application through any medium, whether it has to be technology and device agnostic. And when you see that, the customer's data is there, where exactly at the backend we are hosting, all those points starting from the inception till the code development, till its hosting, and till the time it reaches to the end customer or the end user. So basically all these should be binded in one ecosystem. And that as a model would be, from all the perspective have to be monitored in a very formal way. There should be an absolute no mitigation of having any kind of risk getting associated. If any risk is there, it should be populated and it should be monitored there and then only. And there should be emergency response systems where such mitigations in case of reaching, working out on the data breaches, because we have already seen the kind of people and the data breaches which are there on the net and social medias and everything. I think so their time has come where people have to be proactive enough to at least have two-step approach in terms of much ahead of the market to see, before we get breached, at least what could be the the last mile in terms of what over aggression also we should have in that respect, which I see. Sometimes we said, no, the normal scenarios, we have the best of the boxes in place, we have the mindset, we have the awareness, but no, I think so it is not only about the technology, it's a 360-degree approach of the overall ecosystem, which talks about an awareness which has to be sent forth for the do's and don'ts in terms of the consumer awareness, your employee awareness, people who are looking from different points, and where exactly you have to have a, if you are there on your mobiles and you are accessing on your personal mobile or the corporate data and your personal data, some segregation and awareness should be given to the end users. So all this totally talks about a good and smart ecosystem.
Thank you, Puneet. I think I love the passion. I love the word over enthusiasm, aggression, two-step approach. This should be populated and attended to. Just going to summarize some of the nice words people used. Anuprita mentioned during the pandemic, cybersecurity has got both tension and attention. And I like the word real-time visibility. We've got someone who said gravity tilted more towards cybersecurity professionals, and now they are being used much more. Sunil, you mentioned that. You also mentioned it's not just sell and walk away, but sell and walk with the customers. We also said the spend is happening on workloads, delivering value, safety, technology improvements with human feedback, critical assets being in-house is one way of managing it. The guidelines from RBI and other places for cloud security, eagerly awaited. Anuprita mentioned it's a moving target, tech evolving at 100 kilometers per hour. We have to catch up. A single console will help her quite a lot. Sarath mentioned start with the why to get customers' trust. Trust is the new currency of our economy today, the data economy. Customer has to feel safe and speed of change. We also had CrowdStrike mentioning good statistics on spiders, bears. In 9 minutes, the attacks proliferating, and the golden rule of 1-10-60. And with this, we come to an end with today's discussion. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you, CrowdStrike. Thank you, everyone, for your lovely inputs. Thanks, great session. I enjoyed moderating it. I'm sure you sort of enriched yourselves and learned something new today. Thank you. God bless.
Burgess, you have noted a lot of keywords. Suggest, please share all those with us.
I'll get that, sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thanks. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.